Hello and welcome to the Plant Paradigm Podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with amazing individuals from all around the world and look for ways to create a clean, green, and sustainable future for us, the planet, and all beings. I'm your host, Tom Simak, a fellow plant eater who strives to optimize every living ecosystem, passionate about looking after this beautiful floating rock we call home and all the lovely creatures that dwell among it. Today's episode is with Alan Ramos. Alan is a program and startup coordinator at ProVeg Incubator, which we'll talk a lot more about in the episode. Basically, this means he's at the forefront of the vegan business world, helping boatloads of startups get their feet and helping them succeed is literally his job. Because of that, a lot of things we'll talk about is about vegan business models and different tips, getting into the business world, the future of plant-based, and different strategies companies use to get ahead. I know business isn't the most talked about topic on this podcast, but I think it's an important step in creating a sustainable society and fostering enterprises that have big hearts and can induce mass change. With all that being said, I really hope you enjoy this conversation between Alan and I, and I'll see you on the other side. Alan Ramos, welcome to the podcast. How are you going this morning?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Not too early over here in Berlin, but happy to be on, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
That's all right. You've had your morning coffee. You're ready to get your day started. Are you over at the ProVeg HQ at the moment?
No, not today. I'm starting out from home, but I've been going back a little bit more recently in the past few weeks. So doing a little bit of a split, half at home and half at work.
That's the way the world is kind of turning at the moment, with half people working from home, which is fine. Look, you guys, yourself and all the guys at ProVeg do amazing things. And I know you're part of the sector. That's the ProVeg Incubator. To kick things off with an intro, can you give us a sum up of what ProVeg and ProVeg Incubator is and what your role is there?
Yeah, my pleasure. So it's a bit of a mix, just because ProVeg Incubator operates under a larger NGO called ProVeg International, and ProVeg International is a international food awareness organization set out to reduce the global animal consumption by 50% by the year 2040. So obviously, because it's a huge undertaking that the organization has put on itself, it divides the task between different departments. So, I mean, we have a campaigning department, we have a political outreach team as well. And then we have a corporate engagement department, which is where we function under. So in the corporate engagement, we divide the task a bit. There's teams that work with corporates, work with retailers, but at the incubator, we're working with everything around entrepreneurship and innovation. And we're the world's first incubator that was first focused exclusively on plant-based and cultured food startups. And we've been in operations for a little bit under 2 years now. But like you mentioned, I mean, we've been able to move very quickly, work with great companies from around the world. And up until now, we worked with 40 different companies from 20 different countries. So we've been able to grow our reach quite quickly. And we're actually right now finishing up our selection process for our 5th cohort that starts at the end of October. So we've been able to have great fortune that we've had amazing companies applying to our program, and we've been able to work with a lot of them. What I'm doing on the project, I'm the program and startup coordinator there. So I'm basically in charge of doing a lot of the recruiting for startups, and as well as selecting them when they apply, screening the application, seeing what's the viability of getting them into our program, see if it makes sense. And then once the program gets started, I do a lot of coaching with the startups, a lot of one-to-one work, but I support a lot our program and innovation manager, just putting the program together, make sure that the curriculum makes sense for each startup. Every startup that applies at a different stage, so we have to tailor the program a little bit to each one. And then finally, after the program is finished, we do this thing that's called just post-incubation support, or just alumni support, which is just a community management, because we like to say that once you get into our program, you're part of it for life. So I just manage the family, the community there, to just make sure that everybody is staying on track, and we're helping out as best we can. So yeah, that's pretty much the job description in a nutshell. But I mean, random little tasks pop up here and there. So it's really nice. It's a really dynamic role, and super fun to be on the project.
That's amazing. It just kind of, the whole time you were speaking, I'm just like, Alan's the dream maker. You're like, and in a way, like a lot of people, you have the plan, and then you guys just help make that plan a reality, really, from what I've gathered from what you do. And there's so many
We try
different.
our best. We try our best to
Well,
do
yeah, and
it.
there's a few companies that I looked into that ProVeg has helped, and I dove into the actual companies and what they stand for, their mission, and it's amazing. In fact, I'm actually speaking to Jadira tomorrow, who you guys help fund for Cellular Ag Canada, which is
Great.
amazing initiative, great
Mhm,
company,
mhm.
and there's so much I want to jump into, but I want to start with kind of, in a lot of ways, the biggest barrier when you're coming across a new business or initiative, which is, in my understanding, someone comes to you with like this concept and idea, however, whichever stage they're at, and then once successful, you guys, like, you find the capital for these businesses to then kick off. Is that right?
Yeah, so when it comes to financing, I mean, I think that fundraising is a crucial first step for startups. I mean, I think that is the lifeline for startups. So we try to get them funded as quickly as possible. So basically, what we offer these startups is a 12-week program that covers all the essential topics of a startup. So we cover everything from just general entrepreneurship themes, such as looking at the team, really getting into an in-depth analysis about the company, what they're doing, what they're strong at, what they're struggling with. And then we focus a little bit on the product, not too much, just because we don't count on more elaborate facilities or labs. We're more focused on commercializing the technology. So we've always identified as a business incubator. Focus a little bit on the go-to-market strategy, and then at the end, we do put a lot of emphasis on the fundraising. And basically, one of our strong suits from the beginning has been matchmaking. So, because we are such a mission driven program, I mean, we are able to get a lot of important stakeholders on board because our mission is very clear, right? We want to improve this space and really change the way that we do things when it comes to our food system. So, that's why we're able to have stakeholders across the world, and because we've been able to work with companies from everywhere, we've learned about different markets and have expanded our network there. So I think that one of our strongest suits has always been matchmaking and putting them in touch, putting companies in touch with the right people that they need to get to the next step. And then in terms of fundraising, we put a new package in place that we didn't have before. So as I mentioned earlier, we work with 40 companies. It's broken down about 10 companies per cohort. Up until the first three cohorts, we did not charge anything for the program. We didn't take any equity. We're just entirely mission driven. But after the first batches of companies that we worked with, we realized how important funding was for them. So we put in place a system where we would be able to invest a little bit of money into the startups. We first offer a 20,000 euro grant for all the startups that we admit into our program. And then afterwards, depending on what we see is their potential for impact, also their performance during the program, and then other criteria that we also look into as part of our due diligence process. We can potentially invest up to 180,000 into the company. So we don't invest in all of our startups because we try to add value to as many as we can. But I mean, we don't invest in all of them all the time. But that's pretty much how we support. We have financing packages on our end, but at the same time, we play the role of matchmakers, just to put them in touch with stakeholders, investors, anybody that is relevant for them based on what they're trying to set out to do.
You're like a global Silicon Valley, really,
That's
from
what
all
we,
that.
that's the name that I'm trying to get us to go with. But yeah, I'm still working on it.
No, that's all. That's so cool how you can literally impact and have this mission that's so specific yet so broad. You can help so many companies do such a cool thing. And
Exactly.
do you think It was so funny. I put out a thing on Instagram on our story to see if anyone had any questions for like startup related things. And I had a few things come in, and the most interesting one was actually, do you think that COVID has gotten investors more interested in going and investing in plant-based businesses?
I mean, it's tricky, and I think that it's a discussion that has been going on since it hit, right? Because there was, I mean, a lot of these deals are always tricky to begin with. I mean, much less with a
Mm,
pandemic going around, and it's a lot of back and forth. Even when agreements get made or term sheets get signed, you know, the fundraising isn't secured until the money is in the bank. So there was investments that were already in pretty serious talks. There was term sheets that were potentially already signed, and some investments that maybe didn't go through. But I still think that they were not in a great majority. I still think that from what we've seen in the space and the people that we've talked to, investors are still staying active and they're still supporting their startups. If not new investments are happening, at least investors are following up with their previous investments. So, for example, they want to look after the companies that they invested in early and try to make sure that they're doing okay. So they're following up with follow on up investments just to make sure that they're surviving during this time. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that people were a bit unsure about how investors would be reacting in this situation, but it seems that they've been quite supportive. And then if you just look around the news, just how much plant-based consumption has surged over the past few months during COVID. So I think that it's getting more attention, getting more traction, and people are turning their attention more to it, even during these uncertain times.
yeah, for sure. And I think something that's quite fascinating when we're looking at markets. And when I first heard this, I forgot the CEO of Impossible Foods. I was listening to an interview with him, and he blew my mind with this perspective that plant-based products, predominantly, especially like these meat alternatives, are not marketed to vegans at all. Like that, do you have like they're marketed to meat eaters. Like, do you have much thoughts on what that process looks like? And do you think that's a really good way to go?
Definitely. I mean, and that's, for example, when we're looking at companies that we're trying to get into our program. So the target should be the meat consumer or the flexitarian. I mean, if somebody is making a product that wants to target vegans and vegetarians, automatically it's a lot less attractive for us. Why? Because the vegans and the vegetarians are going to eat the chickpeas, they're going to eat the lentils, they're going to eat the tofu, right? We don't have to be concerned about them
Mm,
because a lot of times the reasons behind their lifestyle choices when it comes to eating are different, right? They might be, you know, related to sustainability or ethical reasons or health reasons. So those are not the people that need to be targeted. When we really want to talk about change and really transforming the way that we eat, we need to target people who aren't as convinced to try other things, so or try different products. So it's all about replicating the products that they know and that they're familiar with in terms of meat, and just replicating them on a level that's plant-based and that's equally as attractive, appealing for the eye, but also super tasty and at the same time affordable, which is why it's a super difficult task to achieve. And that's why startups have such a challenge in front of themselves, because they have to meet so many different criteria. It needs to taste good, it needs to look amazing, and the branding needs to be really cool and hip and attractive, and at the same time, it needs to be at a fair price, which are all, you know, challenges in on their own. So yeah, that's what I would say. That's why the flexitarian and the meat consumer is the one that needs to be targeted at all times in order to move forward the best change.
do you think with that being said, saying like let's target the meat eater, do you think labels come in quite potently? Like, are there talks of like maybe not labeling something as vegan purely because of that reason?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of research that has gone into it. I mean, there's quite lengthy reports that really look into what's the best way to market products. So, I mean, it always goes back and forth. I think it's something that changes every few weeks about what's the best way to attract people. Because, for example, apparently, if you put vegan on a product, it'll scare some people off. But plant-based, for some reason, is more sexy, so and more appealing. So I think when it comes to labels, I think that it needs to be something that is easily understood, but is at the same time is attractive. I mean, I think that if you want to make a burger, whether it's made out of beef or it's made out of peas, right, it needs to be called a burger, just so people can relate to it and find it familiar. So I feel like in that term, on those terms, it needs to be, the product needs to be advertised as a familiar product that people can understand. And at the same time, I think that the plant-based claims should be there on there as well. Not too presently or not too vegan-like, but also do it in a playful way. And I think people are becoming a bit more creative with the way that they're advertising the benefits of their products being plant-based. There's a few packagings that now are just saying "cool for vegans" or something like that. So it becomes a bit more hip, and at the same time, it's not really taking away any attention from the product. Because, for example, there's one company that I can think of that does this "cool for vegans" thing. That when you look at the product, you don't know that it's vegan because it's some sort of like lasagna or something, or tikka masala, and you don't know that it's plant-based because that's all that it says. And then you just read down at the bottom "cool for vegans." You're like, oh wow, okay, shit, it's plant-based. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the labels and how to attract the different consumers.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And we're always kind of seeing a different shift. Like even in Australia, when you go to the shop, you see like nuggets. And then at the bottom, you'll see vegan. Like it's like tiny, like you almost need glasses to get that. And I think that's really cool. It kind of gives a new meaning to accidentally vegan. Like, oh, I accidentally purchased this vegan thing.
That's
There's also
true.
like
Yeah,
all these different levels. And I guess with the vegan term, a lot of it I would assume has to do with like cultural appropriation. Like you, when you see like these protests that are happening that are animal rights related, you don't think plant-based activists. You think vegan activists, and then you see like, I don't want to be vegan because then I got to do these things, and it's like this association between the term vegan and what a vegan does. Whereas you'll never see someone who boasts as being plant-based being quite vocal about it. So I think that's a really smart move for the marketplace to then shift away from the word vegan just to attract more people. Um,
definitely.
on that, you've been doing this as over a year with Incubator, and you must see some really amazing new and creative businesses come through. Over time, you've developed, I'm assuming, an eye to seeing a business that does really well. What kind of things do you look out for?
Yeah, it's. I mean,
A
I'm
hard
definitely.
question.
Yeah, it's a hard question, but I mean, I think you're right on it. I think at the beginning when we first started getting applications, I mean, you don't want to lose out on anything. So you're like, but I mean, could this work? But I mean, if you look at it like this or like that, maybe it makes sense. But I think that the more that you look at applications and the more that you work with startups, you realize what are some of the core elements that they need to have. So the way that we base our criteria is always kind of a top down kind of thing. The first thing that needs to meet the criteria is that they need to be aligned with our mission. So they need to be replacing an animal product. So for us, I mean, it has to be something that otherwise, if it wasn't for this plant-based product coming on the market, it would be an animal counterpart that would be on the shelves. So that's key for us at the beginning. Afterwards, I mean, the product is something that we're attracted in. It needs to be something new. It needs to be something that we feel is missing on the market. But at the same time, a good understanding of the supply chain is really, really important for us as well. So the raw materials are always really interesting, the different technology that they might be using. And it's okay if a company doesn't have all the holes figured out. I mean, there's so many aspects that go into a company that an early stage company, which is the primary stage that we work with, cannot have all these things covered right off the bat. So that's why if they have some holes in the game, it's okay, but they need to be aware of them and they need to be at least a bit willing to work on them and get them sorted out. So a good understanding of what their differentiator is, right? What makes them different is something very important for us. They need to know if there's competition, it's fine, but they need to know how they're going to do their strategy differently. So I would say that having a good understanding of their whole supply chain, and also understanding some of the gaps that are missing on their team, but also who they're targeting, and then on top of that, what makes them different is something that's very key. And then I think that something that we see more and more is also just the vibe on the team, just how the founders present themselves and how they present their projects, and their rapport actually ends up going a long way, because that really creates this sense of belief, right, on our end, because to a certain extent we're taking a bet on all of them. We're taking a bet on, okay, they can make it. So we need to be able to relate to them, not only as a team, not only through their product, but as people as well. So sometimes there's been cases where we're not, entirely sure about the viability of something, but just because the founders are very enthusiastic, they're very passionate, and they have a track record of being hardworking, and we get a feel that they will be very dedicated to the program. We've worked with companies like that in the past, and it's paid off a lot. It's paid off a lot because you believe in the founder's passion, you believe in their work ethic, and they end up delivering quite well.
That's so almost cliche or novelty to be like, you find this person who just lives and breathes their product. Like, you have conviction in what you stand for. And that's actually phenomenal, and probably the hardest part of getting a business done, because it's not something in the plan that you can write down. It's like an internal conviction and mindset that you have to carry, which is it's so good in so many ways that you guys look at that. Because I mean, I'm just looking for from the outside in, but that is like phenomenal. When you see someone speaking about a product and they're passionate, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? I need to try this right now. And on the back of that, being that there's so many things going on, where do you think the future of plant-based food is going?
I think that it's always changing. I mean, I think that just if we see the strides that have been made in the past year, there's always new trends and developments in the space between what products are more attractive than others, what raw ingredients are more attractive than others. So there was a really good summary that one of our companies put together, and they were presenting their pea milk, and they were talking about the evolution of plant-based dairy, for example. And they were saying that you had like the 1.0s that was like soy, for example, and then you had the 2.0s that got into almond and oat and rice and
Oat milk's
etc.
the new thing. It's where it's at,
Exactly.
apparently.
Exactly. But I mean, what they were shooting for was this like alternative dairy 3.0, that it was the peas, and I think now people are experimenting with millets and all sorts of different technology and raw materials. So I think that we can, if we make the same comparison there to just like the industry as a whole, I think we saw the 1.0s coming in with the pea pro. I mean, I guess the 1.0s were the veggie burgers and the vegetable based black bean burgers, etc. And I think the 2.0 started becoming, all these beyond impossible pea protein ones. Now when we talk about 3.0, you see more really deep tech companies coming onto the space. So mycelium is really big, that's coming up. So you have mushroom protein that is really up and coming, but people also wanting to do a lot around algae as well. And then but I think the big one that's really coming quite strong is cellular agriculture, obviously. So everything that's cultured meat is really making a push right now, and getting a lot of investment just to really push it forward. Because, like we mentioned earlier, I mean, the target consumer here is the meat eater, or the flexitarian. So when it comes to that, I mean, if you can replicate entirely a piece of meat, or an animal product, just using technology that mimics it, you know, exactly the same, but without going through the whole really exploitative process, then I think there's a lot of benefits to be had there. So I think that there was a study that was released sometime last year that said by the year 2040, about 60% of the global consumption that we're going to have with meat was going to come from either plant-based or cultured meat. So apparently there was a breakdown between 40 and 20%, between cultured meat being 20 and then plant-based being 40. But every few months we see a new raw material pop up onto the scene about protein being extracted from it to make new base products for plant-based products. So it's a very exciting time, and I think that there's a lot of options to be had moving forward when it comes to the future of plant-based protein.
For sure. And there's going to be so many options of things that we haven't even heard of. Like, especially like 10 years ago, cellular ag wasn't even a thing. I think it wasn't until like 2013 when the first one actually came onto the scene that was $300,000 or whatever it was for that one patty. Like, it was
Yeah.
insane. Um, do you like being in a scene where you see so many raw materials come out? Do you see any holes in the market where you're like, why doesn't someone do this? Or do you think it's all just like a matter of time kind of thing?
Um, I mean, I think it's just a matter of time because I mean, I think that the second that some report comes out about there being holes in the market, there's a new startup popping up too.
Yeah.
Coming up with the innovation with a new product. So I think that the startups are not staying very far behind in terms of staying up to date with what is being demanded by the market. So we still see some holes in the market in terms of products that need to be put out. But I think more and more companies are coming onto the scene and offering more variety in terms of what they offer. So um, I think a few months ago, the things that were coming onto the scene were alternative seafood, alternative eggs, and now you see so many companies doing alternative seafood and alternative eggs. So you do see how these trends keep coming in and out, and startups adjusting and adapting to it as well. But I think in terms of raw materials, there's what's really interesting is that every region enjoys different resources and different access to these different base materials, and the different companies that apply to us and are using locally sourced ingredients come with a completely new approach that we had seen in the past. So I think that there's still a lot of innovation to be had and to be made, and startups are definitely responding to the challenge.
That's amazing. And you mentioned before with the, I think it was the eggs that you said, as soon as, and the seafood, as soon as like there was a hole, it's just like gone. It's getting filled so quickly. On the other side of that, do you think that there's too much saturation somewhere?
Um, I mean, personally, I every time so there's a landscape that there's an organization that puts together. It's really great. It's called the Alternative Protein Landscape, and it's really in depth. They segment it now between all the different product categories. So they do alternative dairy, they do alternative seafood, but they also do algae based companies, fungi based companies. So they really segment the whole landscape. But this initiative started maybe about 3 4 years ago. And if you look at the first landscape, it was very few companies that were on there. I mean, obviously Beyond, Impossible, Just, I mean, all these pioneering companies were the first ones on this map. And now if you look at the comparison between the companies that were on it then as the ones that are on it now, it's just completely exploded. I mean, this landscape is huge. It's huge. It's hard to even find companies within it because it's so broad. Um, so it's continued to improve, and if you look at it for too long, you start to think, okay, this seems really saturated.
Yeah.
But everyone in the space seems to think that there's still much more space to improve on, and that there's space for more players. But for example, I think that it's really important to get these bigger corporates on board. So for example, Nestle putting out all these new vegan products,
Mm,
Gardein as well. Everyone jumping on the vegan train. It's great. Let's everybody come on
yeah.
board. But at the same time, it does put startups a little bit on angst because you feel, okay, if they're able to deploy all their resources and come in with huge research and development teams,
Yeah.
product development teams, resources for marketing, et cetera, they already bypass all the challenges that a young company faces. So a startup might be a bit hesitant or a bit a bit intimidated. I mean, to for lack of a better word, to get on the market because more of these corporates are coming on board. But the thing is that a lot of times these corporates, although they're trying to improve their corporate social responsibility, etc., they still lack the passion that these startups, that these young startups have to get
Mm.
into the market and do it for the right reasons. You know, they're doing it for financial incentives, or because it's the new thing on the market. And I think that that's how the startups can differentiate themselves, because they're doing it for the right reasons, because they care about it, because they're passionate about it. So yeah, sometimes the market does look a bit saturated, and I think it becomes especially concerning when all these corporates are coming in. But at the same time, everybody in the space continues to believe that there's still room for more innovation, and there's still markets that are still untapped, regions as well that need to be explored a bit more. Um, yeah, and different products to be made. I think that there's still a long way to go. But from time to time, if you look too much into the companies that are out, you get a feel of saturation for a bit.
Yeah, I actually love how after you went on saying Nestle and Guardians coming in, saying that they have so many advantages, you actually said startups have this passion that they don't have. Because listening to them, I'm like, oh crap. So like we got like on this such low platform, all these companies have already surpassed all their different issues and stuff like that. But I wonder, in terms of the saturation mentality, if that's really warranted. Because, like you said before, with that article or study that came out, by 2040, it's going to be like 60% of the market. When we look at like like, do you happen to know what percentage of the market like plant-based foods are now? And then we can see what the potential for growth is.
I mean, I think that these numbers are always segmented by regions and also by the industry. I think globally, I don't think that we're above a 5%. But I mean, because these figures are always coming out and the comparisons are always different. I mean, I think one study compares, I don't know, 2017 to 2020. Another one compares 2019 to 2022. So
Right.
it's hard to stay on track with all the percentages. But the growth is always exponential, and every time that a new study comes out that's focused on one industry or one product category over the other, it's always, if not double digit, at least triple digit growth in terms of how that's soaring. I think just like during the COVID times, something around 200% or a little bit more was the growth rate in terms of plant-based consumption. So, I mean, obviously that's just spanning a 3-month period or 4-month period. But all these numbers indicate, that we're on a slow but steady incline. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I'm so glad that you mentioned the saturation thing, because looking at it, if I wanted to start a startup, there's literally no better time than now. And I'd probably say the same thing in a year's time, and probably the same thing a year after that. Because to get to that 60%, which is what our mission should be, to reduce climate change and all these different things, saturate the freaking market. Put so many vegan products in the supermarket that you can't even find the animal carcasses. That would be like drown out the competition, which would be
Exactly.
amazing.
Exactly.
Now, I want to talk a bit more tactical with different businesses that you guys have helped. And since like reading about it, a lot of them have become quite successful. Some even in, home country, Australia. I know a few up in Brisbane have done amazing things with cellular ag and different things like that. When you're looking at these businesses and you're evaluating their plan and looking at all their different options and their projections and all of that, what's something that you found the ones that have succeeded have in common?
I mean, I don't want to just boil it down to, it's not a matter of product, because the product it always changes from startup to startup. But if I think at some of the more successful companies that have gone through our program, all of them count on very strong founders. Count on very strong founders that have just whatever it takes approach, and that are very flexible, that are very open, that are very open to humble learning, Uh, I mean, that they're very assertive, they're very confident in the way that they execute, that they strategize and then execute. So it's very strong founders, very committed, that just have this whatever it takes approach, but at the same time that they're very teachable, that they're open to feedback, that they're open to work with other people, that they're open to share, that they're able to open to collaborate. So I think that these are all things in common that we see in the startups that we work with, that end up going a long way. So the product is very important, the strategy is very important, but the thing that we see most across these teams, it's the grit and the determination that these founders have, to really make it work, and the passion behind it as well. So maybe it sounds a bit, cliche and a bit kind of soft, that it's like, oh, it depends on the founders, or
Yeah,
how committed, or how driven they are, but it really ends up going a long way, and has really paid off for a lot of the companies that we work with.
for sure. It might be cliche, but if it still works, you don't need to fix it, and that's just how it
Exactly.
should stay. Um, do you think, like, what's some crucial things that you would think about before you even start a business, especially in the vegan market?
Yeah, so I think that some of the crucial things that you need to look at is specifically who, what problem you're trying to solve. What problem you're trying to solve. I mean, I think that people who have, a vegan diet, for example, they're pretty aware of what's missing. Oh wow, I mean, I'd love to have this, or I'd love to have that, or why is nobody making this or nobody making that. So I mean, if they have a background in terms of running a business, or launching a product, or developing a product, then they can easily, or more easily, understand how to make an entry. So I think that understanding what problem you're trying to solve, and then who has that problem, and then how you want to do that, makes the most sense. So for example, um, really seeing what are some of the issues when it comes to, now you see a lot of companies focused on convenience food, right? Because I mean, yes, it's great to
Mm,
have all these products that you can pick up at home, and cook up here, or get out at a restaurant, but a lot of times, if you're in a rush, or going from one place to another, you want something quick, tasty, affordable, and at the same time, good for the planet, etc. Then you want something you can just pick up quickly on the go. So companies that are now focused on these gaps are understanding that there's a problem, that there's not enough options, for someone on the go wanting to pick up a quick meal that is good for them. So I think that just having very clear the problem that you want to solve, and then, who it is that has this problem, and how to get to them, how to attract them, how to bring them back over and over again. And, yeah, I would say those are the two things that are most important, because when it comes to product, the taste is very key. Texture, all the whole experience is very important. But I mean, I think price is something that's also a big deal, but something that doesn't have to be achieved right at the beginning. I think that price is something that you can work on down the line. So just offering a really, really good product, and really having very in mind who it is that it's for, and what problem it's solving, are the crucial elements to have right off the bat.
I totally agree with all of that. And I find it so fascinating how you said you don't have to figure out the price at the beginning. And I'm going to go back to that thing I said before, when they had that first cellular ag patty. It was 315,000 Canadian dollars, I think it was. And now the same thing is $11. And like, they didn't have the price figured out. It took so
Yeah,
much money to figure that out. But now you have Impossible Burgers and all these things at the lowest price they've ever been. And every day, it's always going to be the lowest price it's ever been. In a year's time, it's going to be the lowest price it's ever been. And that's, thank goodness for that.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, I think it was Impossible that said that the burger that we have right now is the least tasty that it'll ever be, and the most expensive that it'll ever be as well. So I think that it's just a great way to sum that up. That, I mean, our product is going to continue improving, and our prices are going to continue to go down. So, and that's a great summary of the direction moving forward, about how companies should operate, about always improving their product, but at the same time always improving their accessibility as well.
Oh, for sure. And I'm so shattered that we don't have Impossible Burgers in Australia. Like, it's something I've been wanting to try for so long, but it's just not here.
We don't
And
have them over here either, actually. We don't have them
I
over here, actually. No,
bloody North
none.
America, share your things with us, you selfish
Yeah.
buggers.
Don't keep them all to yourself. Yeah.
um, all right, we're talking working with food at the moment. What are some specific difficulties that you think you have to be really careful with when designing a product or manufacturing that product?
I think that the first thing that come right off the bat is all the like the shelf life stability, for example, is this, how do you want to present this product? Like, do you want it, do you want it to be shelf stable? Do you want it to be cool, chilled, etc.? And you have to figure out what's the best packaging after that so that it's able to get to the end consumer the way that it was designed to be. So there's a big difference between putting something together in your home kitchen and scaling it, to a mass market. What might work, what the same formula or recipe that might work for you in your kitchen won't translate over to a large scale. So there has to be a lot of iteration and feedback and tweaking to that product just to make it work. So that's something that needs to be worked out about, testing that it'll be applicable on a larger scale. And then after that is how to figure out what's the best way to put the product together, just that it reaches the end consumer the way that it's intended to do so. So that's around packaging, that's around supply chain, how you get it to the store, etc. But I say in terms of how you design the product, or how you put it together afterwards, um, I think that it would just have to be in a way that's easily understood and marketable to people, that it's attractive. And then when it comes to putting it together at the production scale, there's a lot of things around, maintaining quality and keeping things, separate and keeping things running smoothly, that you need to have people on board, either on your team or partners that you're working with, to make sure that that's a smooth and seamless process. Um, yeah, but I think that would be in a nutshell what I would say to designing the product and putting it together for a mass market.
For sure. And there's so many things, you got to look at. And I know that you just said a few, but I can imagine there's like 100 things that you should be looking at, and designing would be so cool. And I'm really excited for these businesses. Something that's come out in the last few years that I've really noticed and really appreciated is this like packaging that's made from like corn, or like
Yeah, yeah,
biodegradable
yeah.
pineapple or something like that. Is that like like in your experience, is that something that's like quite hard to organize in terms of a product?
Yeah, I mean it's quite tough because again it comes back to the price again. I mean
Right.
you wanna do something good. You want to avoid plastic. You want to avoid the pollution. You want to avoid all of that. But I mean, unfortunately, these more niche and innovative, pineapple husk biodegradable packages are a bit more pricey than this conventional, really cheap plastic. So I think right off the bat, when companies are really inspired and they say, I want to have a product that helps the environment, reduces waste, and brings down pollution, and no packaging and etc., they kind of have to cut back a little bit on their ambitions, because once they start finding out how complicated these things are, they still want to be competitive on the shelves. So and that's one drawback as well. But there's companies that are working around it, and companies that are putting forward initiatives to make it work. So we've worked with companies in the past that have gone for sustainable packages, sustainable packaging. There's a really cool company here in Germany called New Cow, and they're doing chocolate bars, and they're really awesome because for every chocolate bar that they sell, they plant a tree in Madagascar, and their packaging is entirely biodegradable. So it's really cool because I think they have a slogan. It's like, eat chocolate, or what is it? Eat chocolate, reduce plastic, plant trees, or something like that. So it's really cool. It's just really straight to the point. And then other companies that aren't able to, but I mean, they've been able to grow very quickly, and they're doing really good
Mm.
stuff. I think that you can find them in Korea and in Japan. They've been moving super, super quickly. So they're able to cut down some of they're able to offset some of their costs, with their scaling for the packaging and to be able to offer that. But companies that are not there yet entirely, they're working around it in different ways. There's another company out of the UK making really awesome tempeh products. They're called Better Nature. And what they started doing is they do have plastic packaging right now, but what they started working with is with another partner so that they go plastic neutral. So that for every package that they sell, they're able to offset that plastic usage through that partnership that they have. So even though companies are not able to offer, super sustainable packaging right off the bat, they're still working around it because again, they want to to improve things with their products and not
Yeah.
take things backwards.
For sure. Do you think that like a lot of companies are doing that and that's phenomenal. Do you think that like helps with their marketing and like helping consumers make that choice? Like do you think or have you found that consumers will pay that little bit extra to do something good?
I mean, I would hope so, but the numbers show otherwise. I
Oh
mean,
no, don't say that, Alan.
I mean, I think that still the things that most drive people to purchases are, the product itself and how good it looks, how well it's marketed, and the price as well. So I think that sustainable packaging is important to more and more people, and more so about not using plastic or not buying bags or products in bags that don't need to be there. But I still think that there still needs to be a good way to go in terms of consumers making choices off of the sustainability of the packaging of the products and just how eco-friendly these things are. So I think that there's still some work to be done there.
I'd be so fascinated to see if some responsibility should lie within the governments where these companies are based, where there can be some sort of rebate system where they get money back if they produce these ecologically friendly products. I mean, I don't know what kind of systematic change has to happen for that to go ahead, but that would be just such a great step in this whole direction of being environmentally friendly, offsetting the country's carbon as a nation that might go back to their GDP. And I don't know how that would work, but that would be freaking phenomenal.
Definitely. I mean, I think that there's a big role that government can play in here. I mean, in just in terms of, making us, right? Making all the plant-based, companies trying to get into this space more price competitive, right? Because I mean, if you look at, most of the meat products or animal-based products that you see on the market, all of them are highly subsidized. So I mean, if it wasn't for these subsidies, there's no way that they'd be cheaper than plant-based products. Just if you look at the supply chain of an animal-based product, it's so much longer and so much extensive than a plant-based one that it doesn't make sense that it's cheaper. So I think that, when it comes to packaging, governments can definitely play a role, but we can use a lot more help from governments on so many other aspects as well that would make us a lot more competitive on the market with these other animal-based products.
Yeah, it's such like an unfair skew. Like this whole like meat products have the meat industry supporting them and that whole propaganda. Why can't we have a plant industry supporting us? Come on.
Exactly.
I want
Exactly.
the banana foundation supporting freaking plant meals.
The biodegradable pineapple foundation, right?
Yes, yes, that's what I want. Look, I was reading an interesting post on ProVeg on the blog section about the difference between a brand and a product. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so I mean, when we look at companies that are coming onto the space, it's very quickly we're able to see what their objective is, right? If it's just to get a product onto the market, it's one thing, right? I mean that has its challenges as well, but building a brand is a whole nother animal, right? Because building a brand takes so much resources. I mean, just to get your brand, so people know your name, people know your logo, across different regions, is super, super, super tough. So, there's companies that are focused on building a product, and they can be more elaborate, more very specific, unique products. And there's companies that maybe have a less, exciting or less innovative or less complex product, but they're very well set out that their task is to build a brand. So it ends up being kind of a split focus, right? Because the strategies have to be a bit different. But once companies understand what it is that they want to do, what their strategy is, then they just move forward with that. But with building a brand, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of resources, but it can also pay off a lot in the end. And we've seen companies that we've worked with that are more focused on the product, and there's companies that we work with that are more focused on the brand. But I would say that's how I would split the two up, and that's the differences in the product. I mean, in the projects, because it dictates so much strategy afterwards, who you want to partner with, how you want to spend your resources, right? Obviously, if you're focused on building a brand, you're going to have a huge marketing push, a huge marketing team and partners as well to really give you visibility. And as opposed to if you're focused on a product, then the product can speak for itself. The product is very tasty. You can get clients that way. So, but even then, I mean, if you're focused on building a product, you still have to build somewhat of a brand for yourself. But maybe the focus is not so much there, and you don't have to expend so many resources on it either.
Yeah. I mean, that's so interesting. I would say, like, from the outside looking in, a brand is more marketing. I don't know, because Coca-Cola has a product, but
It's a
people know their
lifestyle.
brand.
Yeah.
What were you saying there, Alan?
That I think that the people making a brand would probably want to say that it's some sort of lifestyle that
Yeah, right.
they're trying to push. But yeah, I mean, I think you were talking about Coca-Cola. I think that's the first example that gets the people sad about how they were actually able to build a brand. So yeah, I mean, it's a huge project in itself.
For sure. And, we mentioned before how, a lot of these people that are starting businesses based on plant-based products, we want to be environmentally friendly with like the packaging and stuff, but not all of it is possible all the time. But like when someone asks you, or you get this kind of situation and someone says, I want to run an ethical business. What does like the term ethical business really mean to you?
When it comes to ethical business, I mean, I would want to say that most companies that we're working with or that are trying to get into this space, have an ethical foundation. But I think that ethics will always be subjective to a certain extent, because, for example, I mean, not to throw anybody under the bus here, but for example, Oatly right now is going through receiving a lot of backlash because of some of the investment that they received. So they just closed like a $200 million round or something like that. So a lot of cash that can go a long way and really help them, increase their visibility and get them everywhere. But one of the groups backing them is a really really not so well seen investment group, and people are having some backlash because why they took money from that organization to begin with, right? Because that company is also investing in other projects that are destructive to the environment, et cetera, et cetera. So are you going to say that Oatly is no longer ethical because they took that investment? Because up until before that, I mean, they were seen as very ethical because they were really pumping, really bringing great visibility onto the space, and really pumping up this sustainability issue, and food industry, show us your numbers, etc. Really trying to call people out. So they were perceived as being very ethical, and now they took on this investment and they're getting some backlash. Then does that mean that they're not ethical? I personally don't think so. I personally don't think that makes them unethical, because I think that money that they're receiving from this group, in my personal opinion, it's money that they're diverting from another project. Money that could have been spent someplace else, and that is now being spent on plant-based milk. So I think that's wonderful. So I think that it's always a bit subjective. But when it comes to running an ethical business, I think that the foundation needs to be there in terms of why you're doing it, what are the reasons behind it, and you should always guide your choices based on that. Um, but I think that, in cases like this, for example, when you have a huge company like Oatly now, it's really hard to make every decision off of, the same ethics that you started with at some point, because it's about how you get to more people, how you grow a bit more, but without losing that ground beneath you about why you started to begin with. So it's a fine line to walk. But I think that just having very clear why you're doing what you're doing, and then staying as best in line with that, and having that as your guiding structure, sets you up the best for long-term success in terms of an ethical business.
Yeah, there's so many amazing things you just touched on. And I think, truly ethical, or being ethical, is very subjective. Someone who consumes meat can still be considered ethical in their own right. Like, that might not be my perspective because of whatever, but that's like the most extreme example of it being subjective. And on the tail end of the episode, there's so much that you have bestowed upon us in the form of Allen wisdom. Is there anything that you'd like to leave us with that we may not have touched on, or that maybe something you're passionate about, or a message that you want to spread? The platform is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great chatting with you and talking more about the work that we do. I think that it's a still very new perspective especially to the plant-based community. I mean, for me at least, when I got onto the project, I was a bit hesitant because it was very strange for me to see plant-based being combined with business, and sustainability combined with business. For me, I thought that these were two opposites at some point. So for me, it took a little bit to kind of put them together and see them as a happy marriage, and use business, to further positive change. So I think that it's been great for me to talk a little bit about the work that we do and the perspective that we see, because it took me a little bit to understand these as very good partners with each other. I always saw them as opposites before. So, but I think, your listeners most likely will already be up to date with the pros or the benefits of a plant-based diet. Um, so the only thing that I would offer more is to just, if anybody is wanting to get into the space, in terms of entrepreneurship, like we mentioned earlier, there's still space. There's still more innovation to be done. We still have an uphill battle in front of us. And if it's not through business, there's so many different ways that people can contribute. If people are considering, a plant-based diet or something, I think that there's great resources. I saw that on your podcast. Also, you have a lot of different eating out tips in different cities as well. So that's a good first little resource to get a hold of some good food. So yeah, I mean, I think that just there's still a lot of work to be done. And even though we might get, very enthusiastic amongst ourselves, the world is going vegan tomorrow. The fact of the matter is that there's still a lot of work to be done. So any little contribution, any little small step that you can take forward to just advance the mission as a whole, I think is always greatly appreciated, and very necessary, I think, more and more. So I think that's it. The only thing that I would mention, in addition to everything else that we discussed today. And just thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you so much for the platform. It's been a blast.
It's been amazing getting to know you. It's always a pleasure meeting new people through our good old friend Zoom.
That's right.
And there's so many people who maybe want to start something, or maybe just want to connect with you. Where can we find you and ProVeg, or ProVeg Incubator?
Yeah, definitely. So you can follow us on social media. Obviously, we're quite active on LinkedIn and Instagram, but also on our website. So www.provegincubator.com. And then I think there's a link there for meeting the team, and there's all the contact details there for the different members. So you can find my contact details there in case you ever want to get in touch. I'm usually first contact at the incubator for startups that want more information into our program, how we can help, what we think about a business idea, or what we're doing with our cohort. but also my email, alan.ramos@proveg.com. Anybody who might have any questions or might want to follow up with any information, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Well, look, you've been absolutely amazing in, leaving us with a lot of information. I've learned a lot that I didn't know, in particular, especially the 2040 stat with 60% of the market blew my freaking mind. And I'm definitely going to be thinking about it as I go to sleep tonight. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you once again for, giving us an hour of your time. And, I hope that this has helped a fair bit of people. Look, you're switched on. So for those looking to potentially start a vegan business, I just wanted to get in contact with you. I definitely do endorse our good friend, Mr. Ramos here. But other than that, have an amazing rest of day in lovely Berlin over there.
Thank you, Tom. Likewise to you as well. All the best and keep up the great work. Thank you so much.
Hi, welcome to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening the whole way through. I really appreciate each and every one of you for lending, your ears and being open to learning about this amazing world that we live in. And especially for those who are quite entrepreneurial, I hope this really benefited you and gave you some ideas or inspiration in what you can do to bring about positive change. Alan, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure having this conversation. Again, all the links, if anyone wants to contact Alan, is in the show notes, so don't be shy. Let us know how this episode landed for you. You can contact us at plant.paradigm on Instagram, or Alan, the ProVeg team, at ProVeg Incubator on Instagram. We're also on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, all the good stuff. If you feel like this episode gave you great value, consider leaving a review. It really, brightens my day to see some nice positive words that are written about the show and how it's affected your life. If you're on YouTube, consider commenting, and subscribing. That's all from me today. Stay happy, eat plants, peace.